particular video in response to a request I've had from one of my subscribers. So everything I say in this tape will have an Australian orientation. It'll be about building in the country, not in the suburbs. I won't cover everything because I don't know everything and I didn't do everything. And what I share will be limited by my experience. Remember, I'm not a professional builder. I'm not a tradesman in any of the areas that you see me working. I'm just a self-taught home handyman. But let's have a look at some of the things I've learned and maybe one or two of the problems that I had that you can avoid, and look at some of the steps that you have to go through and how best to get yourself through those steps in building your own home. Well, that's a big subject that I can't cover completely. But if you're looking at building in the country, the first thing I'd suggest is look at the availability of power. In Australia, if there's no power on your block, a step-down transformer is going to cost you about $30,000, and it'll probably cost you about $15,000 to $20,000 if you've got to run wires either above ground or underground for any distance greater than, say, about 100 yards. My block, I was really lucky because I had a step-down transformer on the telephone pole just behind me, which was used for street lighting, and the street lighting was discontinued, so we were just able to connect the house straight up to it. There's other people around here that bought blocks and there's no power at all, and there's, they're looking at about $50,000 to be able to get the electricity on. So when you're looking at a block of land, look at the availability of power. See if there's an existing DA on the block. There was a DA on this block. It was for a small, tiny, single-storey, two-bedroom home, and I've obviously gone way past that. I've built a large three-bedroom, double-storey home with a huge garage as well. But I was able to use that existing DA and just put in a modification to an existing DA. It was a lot easier in the planning process. If you're looking at buying a block and it doesn't have a DA, don't panic. It's just more paperwork that you've got to go through. The other things to look for on a block of land is slope, road access, privacy, those sorts of issues. You've got the common sense to work that out. Don't be like people looking at a block nearby who are horse mad, and we've had quite a lot of people come up here and look at this block and say, oh yes, I want to run horses on it, and it's goat country. It's unfenceable. It's like this. It's covered in heavy wood. There's not much grassland. I mean, that's just crazy. They're looking at buying the first block that they can find at a price they can afford. Don't make that mistake. Keep looking. We were very lucky. This was the very first block of land that we looked at when we began our search. You might have to look at a couple of hundred before you find the right one. All depends on the availability of land in the area that you're looking at. Live in the real world. Make an honest assessment of your prospects financially, what you'll be allowed to build, what you can afford to build, what you'll be able to build. Be honest about your own limitations. You might just have too much time invested in earning money to build a house to be able to actually go and build it. So you've got to work out all those factors and be honest with yourself about it. And my own personal suggestion would be the easiest way, not easy, but the easiest way to build your own house is to stay within conventional building practices. I'm not taking anything away from people who use all sorts of alternative materials and ideas, but the fact is it's hard enough doing a conventional build, let alone having to go into some highly specialised area. And from what I've seen on YouTube, you don't necessarily save yourself money or time by going that route. That's just my opinion, and respect to the people who go in another direction. You've got to have a pretty good idea of just how long it's going to take you to build your own home, because of all the other factors that go with it, like your income earning capacity, where you'll be living, and so forth. Delays in building your own home are inevitable. There'll be times where you'll get to a particular spot and things will just stop for a variety of reasons. And you've just got to wait and let the days and sometimes weeks tick by until you can go again. My advice would be work out how long you think it's going to take you to build your own home, and then double it. If you're planning as part of your build to live on site in a caravan or with a caravan in a shed, you've got to have a power supply and good clean water. Don't kid yourself to think that you can do without those things and make do with bottles of water and batteries and whatever. You've got to have power and you've got to have water. You also need sewage. You can't just put your wastewater and your toilet out through a hose onto your block. It'll be a council requirement if you apply for a camping permit on your own land in Australia that you've got to have a DA, and part of your application for that camping permit will have to show how you're going to treat your wastewater. In my case, the way I got around that was I put the sewage system in first when I built the shed and attached the shed to it. So there's a toilet in there and everything goes into the septic system, even though the house hadn't even been started. We had that system operating. And the other thing you've got to ask yourself if you're thinking of living on site is how long is fair to expect my family to stay in these substandard conditions. If you don't, you're making a big mistake. The cheapest place in Australia to get a really good late model on-site caravan to make your stay as easy as possible is at the salvage auctions. The two main companies are Mannheim, Manheim. You look up manheim.com.au or Pickles. You'll see caravans that have been written off, and quite often there's very little damage to them. Sometimes they've got hail damage on them. This one wasn't a written off caravan. I couldn't find one at the time when I needed to get one, but that's the cheapest way to go. Here's an area of building that's unavoidable and far from cheap. As far as architects go, I tried to save myself as much money as possible by doing most of the drawings myself. I just did them in Photoshop. We didn't use any fancy drawing program, although use that if you're familiar with them and happy. And engineers, well, there are certain stages in the build, like when we poured the concrete in the holes for the piers down through the fill, I had to have an engineer come out on site. A lot of the engineering you can get done if you buy a kit home, because the kit home company will include all that engineering that's got to go into the council for you as part of the paperwork part of your purchase from them. In my case, the upstairs of the house was a kit home, and so all the architectural and engineering work was done by the company I bought the upper story off. The lower story, the garaging, I drew that up and had to have a draftsperson draw that up and engineer the steel beams and the joists and so forth. So in my case, I've used a combination of both. Self-designed downstairs and all the engineering and architectural work supplied by the house supply upstairs. I found getting tradies in the Australian country fairly difficult because of the distance involved. Beware of just using the local tradesmen, because I found some of them were crap. Sometimes you've got to get 2 or 3 quotes. Sometimes you're just flat out getting the tradies to come out and have a look at the job, let alone do it. The other thing that will happen with tradies is you're going to lose time. You'll want the roof put on next week and he'll say, I've got a month's work. You know, it's the right guy for the job. You can't do much else and you've just got to wait. It's all part of building in the country. But a good tradie in the country is worth his weight in gold. And my advice would be, expect them to cost you double what you think. In Australia, you need 3 main pieces of paperwork to be able to build and live in your own home. The very first one is a DA, a development application. That's basically a fairly simple document to get, and you submit a site plan with a drawing of where your house is going on the block and very basic things about what you want to build. The second piece of paper, which follows from that, is the construction certificate. That's where all the detail has to go in about sewage and what the house is going to be made out of and so forth, and how it meets the various codes and requirements of the time. That's a detailed document to get. My advice would be to apply for both at the same time or back to back. It is a lot of work to get that through, but you've just got to get your head down and go through it. and there's no point just having a DA because you can't start building and you can't even start bulldozing work in some areas. So get the DA and the construction certificate. The third piece of paper you need is an occupation certificate, and that happens at the end when the council inspects the building after you've finished it and says yes, now you can live in it. That's the hardest one to get. It's not the scariest one, and personally I found the council staff very helpful to work with. They're really only enforcing the rules. They're public servants, and the guys that I've worked with locally have been cooperative. They're council workers, yes. They're rule enforcers, yes. But they want to work with you. And the only thing that I've found really with the council in building my own home myself was they just wanted assurance that the building would keep going on. They've seen too many projects where people have started them and stopped. So I was generously given pretty much as much time as I needed to build a house rather than just a very short period. And my local building inspector said, as long as you're continuing to build, we're happy. Siting your home on your block involves two aspects. The first one is locating it on the block. Whereabouts on the block is the best place for the house to go? This will be determined in the country by distance from the bush, by slopes, by other features that are already there, like there's a dam already over there and there's a road there. Once you've got the location of your house worked out on your block of land, then you need to orientate it and work out which way do I want this house to face. What do I want to see out the front door? What do I want to see out the lounge room? Is there a view that I want to focus the house on, which was in my case? Is there something I don't want to look out? In my case, I didn't want to look out on my garaging, so on that side of the house I put things like pantry, linen press, toilet and so forth, and left the lounge room and the living areas on the side looking out at the view. So just work out which way you want to twist that house around. The passage of the sun obviously will also influence how you turn and position the house on the block. It's one of the great things though, is to be able, in the country where you've got a big enough block, to be able to turn that house and work out exactly which way you want it to face. And the other thing you can do is, once you've got the outside plan of your house, and you can change all the internal rooms and switch them around to fit that orientation. Sometimes you mirror reverse, sometimes, like in my case, you take the front door from the back of the plan and you put it up the front and so forth. It's a lot of fun. This is one aspect of building my own home that I really enjoyed, and I'm sure you will too. That's to take somebody else's basic floor plan and personalise it to your situation. There's a couple of reasons for doing this. The first one is the orientation of the sun. Our sun rises over there, midday it's there, and it sets over here. So I knew I needed to put the verandas on that side of the house to give shade during the heat, and with the viewing deck out on that side of the house, not only facing the view, but away from the heat of the afternoon sun. And then the rooms that weren't too worried about heat during the day, like the bedrooms, we put down on the back wall. Another reason to change things within your floor plan is because of your particular lifestyle. So in our case, we didn't want the front door down the back as it was on the floor plan. We wanted it up this end to suit our block, and we wanted the kitchen and the living area up here at the front of the house facing the view. So I changed things around completely within the outside walls of the house to make the rooms go where we wanted them to go. And I also, for example, in our case, I deleted the ensuite because there's only Brenna and I here, and we don't need an ensuite. We're not worried about resale values. Very large in my thinking about orientating rooms within the house was to put the kitchen at the front rather than tucked away in some place at the back of the house, because we wanted an open living style. The kitchen tends to be the centre of most Australian homes, and I'm sure that's trending right around the world now. And the other reason I wanted to put the kitchen up the front was so when my wife, who's a chef, is working in the kitchen, she's got magnificent, very pleasant views here rather than just sort of looking out the back at some scungy setup. I also took the opportunity to increase the size of the kitchen by 2 metres here. We just couldn't make it the size we wanted and have the pantry in it as well. And so what I did was, the roof up here was a veranda, So I just built the kitchen out to that veranda. It actually cost me no more in roof space and expense because that was already included in the basic costs of the house plans that I was working off. So now we've got a kitchen that suits our needs and with the pantry that we wanted. The other thing I might add about having a pantry is it means we could have big windows all the way around, and we don't want any cupboards on the walls at all. And with a pantry, with a good sized walk-in pantry, you don't need cupboards in a kitchen. You just need benches, and that allows you to get this really great view right out of the kitchen. I found meeting those requirements not too difficult in building my own home. You've got to do a bit of research, you've got to find the right website. At least these days you can do that, and you can Google a lot of stuff to find out what on earth they're talking about and what permit you need to require. Most councils will give you a list of the documentation that you need to submit as part of your DA or your construction certificate, and you just work your way through them basically. So you find some particular piece of government environmental requirement, you don't know what on earth it is, you just Google it, do a bit of research, find out, see if there's a form that you've got to fill in, talk to your building inspector about how to fill that in, and if you do it incorrectly, they'll correct you and say where you need to change things. As far as soil and geotech reports go, in Australia, when you're building in the country, particularly if you're putting in an on-site sewage disposal system, like using a tank to process the material and then an on-site transpiration pit, and even for the building itself, you've got to get a geotech report. I got round it on my place by luckily having a quarry next door that was excavated out, and so I could photograph all the different strata layers, and I sort of fudged my way through without that expense. But most of the time you are going to have to get a soil person come in, take boring samples. Well, I don't mean boring samples, I mean samples out of a bore, and get those cylinders of earth and give you a report on it. That goes to the council, and that tells you and them whether you're building on rock, whether you're building on sand, what foundation requirements you're going to need. So in the long run, it's a good thing to have. It is an expense you need to allow for, and at the moment it costs around about $2 grand to get that sort of geotech report done. If you're building in the Australian countryside, you've got to have a bushfire plan. There's various helpful sites like rural fire services sites and so forth in Australia that shows you how to prepare the documentation. You've got to figure out the slope up or down from your building site. You've got to measure the distance from there to the foliage. You've got to describe the sort of vegetation that you've got. Most of it will be what's called, as behind me here, dry scleral forest. And then you go through a process and a formula where you work out the fire rating for where you want to build on your particular block. The current regulations in Australia now require pretty much near 100 metres cleared around the house. So one of the factors when looking for a block is if you're going to buy something that's very heavily forested, or if you want to build up on a ridge, you're going to have to take into account the bushfire plan beforehand. So if the worst case scenario is to build up on top of a peak with bush where the fire's going to rush up to you, and then want to build a timber house up there or something up on poles that's going to burn easily. A lot of these sorts of houses were built in Australia back in the 60s and so forth, and they're now the ones that burn first in a bushfire. And a lot of the houses that get burnt these days, I think the people would get a surprise when they go back to rebuild on a new home on their old site to find they've got major problems because of the proximity of the bush. So when you're looking at a block, look at the foliage and the bushfire situation. I was very lucky with this block because it was pretty well much cleared where the house was going to go. My next door neighbour, his block was covered in saplings, just regrowth, and he got that cleared. And if you're going to do any clearing, once again, you've got to check the regulations on that. All these things would probably apply in other countries as well, particularly in America with pine forests and so forth. You don't want to build a house and go to all that trouble and then have the thing burnt down, or worse, not have it burnt down and worry about bushfire every day that you live in it. So work out your bushfire plan, and that's, you're going to have to do that as part of your documentation. Work it out, don't be afraid of it. It's just one of those paperwork requirements you've got to go through, and really it's there to protect you in Australia from this stuff getting burnt and out of control. If you're looking at being an owner builder, then you're also probably looking at being the project manager. That means that you're going to be responsible for the timeline and order and sequence of when things turn up, when tradies arrive, when building materials arrive, and at what stage various steps in the build process occur. Now, I didn't have a chart written out. You might like to do that, some guys do, and a professional builder will do that. He'll have a chart with the weeks numbered and all of that. I decided to not go that way. I didn't want to put a timetable on myself that I was feeling like I was lagging behind all the time. So I sort of had a more free-flowing approach, but I knew basically this sequence in which things needed to be done. It's fairly much common sense, and I only thought about 2 to 3 weeks ahead most of the time. Mistakes I made would include getting some materials delivered on site way before I ended up needing them. So you're going to make mistakes. You're going to order some materials and you'll see them sitting there and think, why on earth did I order that? With timber you've got to be careful because as in my case, if you leave it out too long it starts to deteriorate. And it's always easy to be wise looking back in retrospect, but you're the one that's got to manage that sequence of events. So I found that an enjoyable task, and like I said, I only looked a couple of weeks ahead and planned what needed. So for example, when the house reached a certain stage and the frames needed to go up, I thought, rightio, in about 2 weeks time I'm going to need to get a crane in. If I don't get a crane in, how am I going to do it? On other occasions I'd look at the possible ways of doing a job and go, okay, I can do that by myself, or no, I'm not going to need to get family or some next door neighbours to come and give me a hand, or I'm going to have to hire a piece of machinery. So you can do most of that and work that out, most of that as you go along. I didn't really get into a situation where I found myself stuck. So I found project management enjoyable and fairly easy to do. It's essential with project management that you've got the total picture of the build in mind, and the best way to equip yourself for this is to read some of the books on building that apply in your particular area. I've recommended some that apply in Australia, and I'm sure there's some for other countries as well, but you need to sort of have looked before you begin the project at the whole thing so that you know, okay, I've got to go from earthworks right through there and work out where the various stages will be. So equip yourself for that by knowing how a building goes up, and the easiest way to do that and the quickest way to do that is find a good book that'll just give you that overall picture. Some jobs you will struggle with, be overwhelmed by, or just hate. I found that in some situations task was so big I just had to break it down into a day at a time in small sections, and I'd start working away thinking I'm never going to get this job done, and then about 2 weeks later you look back and you go, oh, I've finished it. I've personally found the videos very encouraging. When I look back and see what I've done, if I knew all that I had to do at the beginning I never would have started. So with big jobs, with difficult jobs, just work away at them slowly. Running out of money. The way to avoid this is to take the time and trouble to make a good budget. Make it a realistic one, and if anything, make it a pessimistic one. Allow 30% extra on what you eventually calculate, the things you didn't expect to occur. Upsetting the council. You want to make your local building inspector a really good mate. Don't do anything that contravenes council regulations. It's your responsibility to find out what you need to do to meet council regulations. And if you're having to do anything that's all dodgy, you're building a crap house. Don't take on jobs you just cannot do. You don't want to try and do things you haven't got a clue the right way to do. No one can know everything in the building game, so when you need tradies, or you need to get advice, or you need to teach yourself how to do a job in building your own house, take the trouble to do it. Never ever just barge in, fingers crossed, and hope things will be alright. That's a recipe for disaster.